I came home from college with laughter still fizzing in my chest, the kind that sticks to your ribs and warms you from the inside out. For a few streets, I even believed the world would let me keep it. Then I opened our front door and the air changed. Cold, tight, metallic, like a storm had rolled into our little hallway and decided to live there. Mom was already wearing her coat. Her scarf was knotted too high, as if she'd tried to hold her throat together with fabric. "Hurry, Nora," she said, not quite looking at me. "We have to go to the hospital. It's your dad." The day buckled. "But this morning you said he was better," I whispered. "You said—" "The hospital called." Her eyes were glassy and wild. "He's worse." We didn't talk in the car. The city flickered past. Traffic lights, a bus shelter with a peeling ad, a kid dragging a wheeled backpack. I listened to the shallow, ragged sound of my mother breathing and pretended I didn't know what it meant. The hospital smelled like hands that have been washed too many times. We followed a nurse down a corridor where every door was a mouth that could swallow you whole. The white sheet was tucked so gently around him, like a promise someone else would have to keep. I understood without understanding. The sound that tore through me wasn't a scream. It was something lower, older, the noise an animal makes when it finds its den torn open. I wanted to pull the sheet back and insist he get up the way he always had, when I shook his shoulder and said, "Dad, you're going to be late." But he wasn't late anywhere. He was gone. Grief is a place, and we moved into it. Days slid sideways. Neighbors came and sat on the edges of chairs, their voices sugared with pity. Pots clinked in the kitchen, hands patted my shoulder, as if I were a small, startled horse. The house thinned. It felt like the walls had been made of my father's laughter, and once it left, cold got in. Bills arrived with the dull regularity of a pulse. Fees lingered in my inbox like polite threats. We didn't say the word money out loud, but it was everywhere, hiding under the table, breathing softly. "Let me work," I told Mom after 3 nights of counting ceiling cracks until dawn. "I can tutor. A private school will take me on. We'll be okay. You're young." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. People talk. "And if something happens?" "What do I say?" "Your father—" The sentence ran out of road and tumbled into quiet. She tried instead. "Housework for a woman with immaculate nails and the kind of perfume that arrives before she does." Mom lasted a week. The woman pressed money into her hand and said too brightly, "You're very pretty, dear. I can't risk—" Well, you understand, Mom came home small and shaking, like she'd been washed in cold water and hung to dry. Her friend Sophie put coffee in her hands and hard advice in her ears. "You're young, you're beautiful. The world eats widows alive. Marry again. Let a man be a roof." Mom said no until she started watching me walk home from the bus, with my shoulders hunched and my keys between my fingers. Until the street corner boys learned my schedule and traded condolences for whistles. I stopped going to college on a Tuesday that felt like giving up smoking. My hands shook all day, and I kept thinking, just one more class. And then didn't. Mom looked at me that night with a tired courage that scared me more than anything. "Without a man," she said softly, "we are not safe." Sophie found Martin Cole like she was picking a dress from a rack. Widower, office job, a house. He wore a gray suit that had forgotten how to be new and smiled with the corners of his mouth only. Mom married him in a room that smelled like lilies and floor polish, and I moved my life into cupboards that didn't want it. The house creaked in a voice I didn't recognize. Martin's smile was never for me, which was almost a comfort. For a minute, things smoothed. Cash appeared on the kitchen counter in tidy folds, like a magician's trick. When Mom asked where it came from, Martin said, "My salary," and something at the back of my neck felt damp and cold. Still, when Mom asked about my classes, he said he'd pay. I wanted to be grateful. I tried the word on, and it didn't fit. The knocking started on a heavy afternoon when the sky sat too close to the roofs. It wasn't polite. It was a fist demanding. Mom glanced at the clock. Martin never came home before dark, and opened the door with the chain still on. 4 men pushed the chain, the way you push luck when you've never been punished for it. "Where's Martin?" the tallest one said, looking past her. He had a face that had practiced the pleasure of frightening women. "He's not home," Mom said, both hands on the door without realizing. He laughed, and it sounded like small bones. "He leaves the office at 4. From 5 to 8, he loses money with us. Last night, he lost big." His gaze found me in the kitchen doorway. It was a finger laid on my cheek without touching. "That the stepdaughter?" he asked conversationally. "Collateral has a way of bringing men to heel." Mom shoved me back and locked the door between us, her voice going cold as she turned to them. "This is between you and Martin," she said. "Leave us out of it." They left the house without leaving the air. When Martin finally came home, he put his hands up as if to show how innocent they were. Promises patted our heads and put us to bed. I lay awake and watched the dark breathe. He came in later, carrying a red bridal dress folded over his arm like a wound. "Get her ready," he said to my mother without looking at me. "Tonight." I didn't understand the first time. I thought maybe he meant a celebration, a joke told wrong. Then Mom said very quietly, "You lost her," and I knew. "I can't pay," he muttered, staring at a corner of the room as if it had heckled him. "They'll take her anyway." If a heart can freeze upright, mine did. Mom's chin trembled once and then stopped. "At least let me buy sweets," she said. "It's a wedding." Greed is stupid and impatient. Martin barked something that meant yes and slammed the door behind him. The house sighed. Mom grabbed my wrist so hard our bones spoke to each other. "Run!" she said, already dragging me toward the back. "Don't look back." "Do you hear me?" "Not once." She kissed my forehead and pushed, and I was outside. Some streets were light and some were holes. I took the ones with light until the city tilted, and I couldn't tell the difference anymore. When the sleek black car idling at the curb appeared in front of me like a solution, I didn't think about whose it might be. I pulled open the back door and slid inside, dropping into the footwell like a coin into a fountain. I folded myself small and tried to breathe without making a sound. A door thunked. A man slid into the passenger seat. He carried authority the way some men carry cologne, thick enough to taste. "To the tower," he told the driver. His voice was polished steel. They didn't see me until they did. We stopped in front of glass that went up into the sky, and when I climbed out behind him, the sidewalk erupted. Cameras, faces, questions like stones. "Who is she? Are you married? Is this the one?" I should have said nothing. I should have run again. Instead, I heard myself say, "He's my husband," like a woman jumping from a burning window into a stranger's arms. The man turned to me, and I saw his face. I'd seen it on billboards and magazine covers, and the backs of bus seats. Sebastian Hart. A name like a headline. Eyes like winter at night. His jaw clenched so hard I could hear his teeth consider each other. Then he looked up at the cameras and said, "My wife," and my lie turned to a plate we both had to carry. His country place was all clean lines and expensive quiet. A registrar came and watched our hands shake as we signed. I wrote my name next to his as if it were a dare. When everyone left, the house widened around us. He looked at me like I was a problem he wanted to solve with fire. "What in God's name were you thinking?" he asked, too calm to be safe. "I wasn't," I said, because it was true. "My stepfather lost me in a card game. They were going to take me. You were the only door in a hallway that led to nowhere." He paced, long strides, cutting the room into pieces. "You detonated your life in my lap," he said finally. "You could have ruined me." "I'm sorry," I whispered, which didn't begin to touch it. I was sorry for the cameras, for his jaw, for the heart still beating in my chest like an ungrateful drum. He called a woman named Rosie to stay with me. She wore kindness the way other people wear jewelry. "Eat," she told me, setting a tray on my knees. You can't be brave and hungry at the same time. I chewed and tasted cardboard and exhaustion. At the Hart Mansion, Sebastian's mother was a hurricane dressed as a woman. Margaret's anger glittered. I could feel it from miles away. She had plans for her son, alliances and photographs, and a daughter of her friend Sandra named Madison, who looked like an answer to a question no one had asked me. Margaret told him to fix it. She didn't say please. "It's not that simple," Sebastian said, voice like gravel dragged over silk. "The city saw. The name doesn't survive a farce." "Then I will fix it," she said, and the room temperature dropped. His father, Richard, had a different gravity. He said we should make it official in the eyes of the world. Lights, flowers, polished silver, a reception so large the city wouldn't dare blink. Margaret hated it, but Richard built empires with his mouth, and people lived in them. They dressed me in pink and gold that felt like candlelight on skin. Aaron King's wife fussed with my hair until I looked like a girl who belongs in photographs. I didn't recognize myself until I saw Sebastian's face when I stepped into the hall. Pride darted through me, startled and bright. He wore a gold sherwani that turned every head. His eyes kept returning to me as if they were tethered, and I tugged without knowing. People smiled like confetti. Margaret smiled like a knife. For 2 hours, I was a story the city wanted to tell itself. The story ended at our front door. Martin had seen the pictures. He came to the mansion with a voice full of rights and a face like a bruise. He demanded. The guards looked to Margaret, and Margaret looked at me like one looks at something that's fallen off the table and broken. She told them to let him take me. "No," I said, and meant it with every cell. "Please, don't hand me back," she didn't hear me. Or maybe she did and didn't care. The world tilted hard left, and I was outside again, the night sticky, Martin's hand like a cuff. The beating didn't surprise me. It was the lazy efficiency of it that did. Pain is private even when someone else is causing it. I tucked my mind into a small place and stayed there, counting the seconds between breaths. Sebastian arrived with police and a fury that changed the shape of the air. He didn't ask me if I could stand. He put his coat around my shoulders and said, "Enough," to a room that suddenly believed him. Martin's mouth kept moving, but his future had already been decided. He went one way in handcuffs. I went another, wrapped in Sebastian's silence. "Take me to my mother," I said in the car, and he didn't argue. We found her in a hostile kitchen, stirring a pot with hands bandaged in fresh bruises. When she saw me, her face cracked and all the light came out. We held each other, and I pressed my cheek to her hair and said, "I'm okay," until I almost believed it. I told her about a woman named Rosie, and a house that wasn't cruel, and a man who could be, but wasn't with me. Back at the mansion, Sebastian walked into a room full of his mother's disapproval and didn't stop. "You gave my wife away," he said, the words cold and edged, "to a man who beats women." In my house, Margaret opened her mouth and closed it around nothing. I watched a mother learn the limits of her power and didn't enjoy it. She loved him, just differently than he needed. After that, the ground under us shifted. Reporters still circled like gulls, but their questions bounced off a wall I hadn't known I had. I walked the halls without hunching, learned the patient rhythm of Rosie's tea, how to sleep without waking to listen for footsteps. Sebastian worked too hard and slept not enough. Some nights he came home with his tie turned into a noose, and his voice cracked with meetings. He looked at me like I was a lake he might want to fall into, and then reminded himself he didn't know how to swim. We practiced being married. It was awkward and gentle and strange. He learned I hate coriander and love thunderstorms. I learned he reads the ends of books first because he likes to know if his time will be rewarded. I didn't tell him that people aren't books. One night, rain tattooed the windows, and I stood under it on the balcony until my hair stuck to my neck. He found me there, a towel in his hand. "You'll catch cold," he said, and the kindness in it made my throat ache. "I was already cold," I said without meaning to. The towel landed around my shoulders like a hug you pay interest on. He didn't touch me for a long breath. Then he did, his fingers slow and careful on my cheek, like he'd been allowed to hold something fragile and didn't want to be uninvited. The first kiss surprised us both, not with heat, though there was that, but with relief. There is a home you make with two hands, and another you make with two mouths learning each other's names. After, he laughed into my hair in disbelief. "You fell into my car," he said, as if reminding the universe it had a sense of humor after all. "You said I was your wife," I answered, and the word wife felt less like a borrowed coat and more like something I'd sewn myself into. The city kept trying to read us like gossip. Margaret kept trying to shape us like wet clay. Madison visited once with eyes like sympathetic knives and said she hoped I was happy. I said thank you and meant none of it. Richard shook my hand and told me I had a spine, and for the first time, I believed it was a compliment. I visited Mom in the hostel kitchen as often as I could, sitting on a crate and stealing spoonfuls from her pots. She had a line down the middle of her face that hadn't been there before, a tightness when she lifted heavy pans. She told me she was fine, the way women tell you the weather is fine while wringing out their sleeves. Martin apologized from a distance, letters written in the round hand of a man who has finally met his consequences. Mom forgave him, because forgiveness is a coat she wears in all seasons. He got out and disappeared sideways. Some men are shaped like exits. Margaret didn't say the word sorry either, but she learned to say good morning without tasting ash. She discovered she loved me in the small ways first. The way I washed berries and left them to drip dry on a tea towel. The way I aligned the books on the coffee table by color without noticing. Love is often an accumulation of tiny permissions. One day she asked me if I wanted to be shown the rose garden, and we walked among things that hurt and bloomed and tried not to mention the metaphor. And Sebastian, he didn't become a different man. He became more himself. The sharpness that made him dangerous in a boardroom turned into precision when he listened to me. He didn't promise the world. He promised dinner at home by 8 and sometimes made it. He slept with one arm heavy across my waist like a vow. And when nightmares came, he woke me gently, as if my name were a glass he didn't want to chip. People say you can't grow love on the ruins of a lie, but they forget how good plants are at finding light. We watered ours with ordinary things, grocery lists with ridiculous scribbles, the way he texted me a photo of a crooked tie, and I sent back a tutorial and 3 kiss emojis, the way Rosie pretended not to see, and then told us both we were impossible and made dessert. One evening, months after the storm, the city did what it always does when it runs out of outrage. It moved on. The questions softened. The cameras blinked elsewhere. We walked down a street without anyone turning to look, and I realized how heavy it had been to be a story. On that quiet night, Sebastian stopped under a grocery store awning and looked at me like he'd reached a decision that made sense everywhere. "When you climbed into my car," he said, "I thought, this is a disaster. You rearranged me, and I'm grateful you did." "You rearranged me back," I said, and it was true. He'd taken a girl who had learned to fold herself and taught her to unfold even if the edges got creased. We went home carrying milk and basil and a lemon we didn't need. In the kitchen, the lights were warm. Rosie had left a note shaped like a heart and a pie shaped like forgiveness. I stood on tiptoe to kiss my husband, and he bent, as if the house itself had leaned closer to hear. I think about that first night sometimes, the white sheet and the corridor that smelled like endings, and I want to tell the girl I was that endings can look like doors if you squint. I want to tell her she will run, and she will choose wrong, and she will say something foolish on a sidewalk full of eyes, and somehow it will still be okay. I want to tell her safety is not a man, but sometimes it lives in one. My name is Nora Hart. I still hum under my breath when I'm happy. I learned that laughter holds, even when the world tries to pry your fingers apart. I didn't set out to marry a man like Sebastian. I set out to survive. Somewhere between the running and the stopping, survival softened into living, and living into love. People ask how we met, and we tell them the truth. In a car. Then we leave out the rest, because some stories get better when they're only ours. When they press, I smile and say, "It was a long drive." And it was. The kind with wrong turns and unmarked exits, and a view that made your breath catch if you dared to look up. We looked up. That's all. That's everything.